hier ist live. Achso, nee, live. Aber okay. Okay. We're going to start in 5 minutes or 3 minutes. It seems to work. Okay. 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
I think I have red ears, don't I? It's a bit hot, but I think we're ready to go. Okay, stream to us auf Facebook, auf sonst wo, Twitter funktioniert, ja? Ja. Legen wir los?
What do you want me to plan around the room? Or?
No, just Yoshi and I are going to say hello to someone else.
Oh, so,
Got it. And maybe just the focus, so the text might be.
Sorry.
Okay. Come on now.
thanks for that, guys.
Sag mal, wo wir stehen hier im Bild.
Nee, das ist gut. Super. Da komme ich dann auch jetzt dahin. Ich schreibe dann jetzt irgendwie. Okay. Ready? Set. Go.
So, hello everyone in the room and on the live stream, hopefully. Just waiting for my co-host. Sorry for the trouble we had. We are doing a little bit an experimental streaming setup today and streaming on multiple channels. I guess most of you in the stream will probably be online on YouTube, but we're also streaming on, I don't know, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Vito, whatever, like everywhere. So glad to have you here. I guess we're about a dozen of people here in the room and hopefully a couple of you on the live stream. This is the 11th Accessibility Club Meetup. It's the second time we are here in the Central Library of Düsseldorf. This is my co-host Mark. Most of you will know him from the Beyond Tellerrand conference, where we piggyback for a couple of years because it's quite nice to have the conference guests at the Accessibility Club meetup as well. Sorry. So today this is a hybrid event. We have this streaming option, so I hope a lot of people of you can join us. There will also be recordings afterwards, and a very warm welcome to the people in the room here. I guess probably all of you will have attended the Beyond Tellerrand conference yesterday and the day before. So good morning, another one. We are going to, this is a very informal meetup. We are going to have a couple of presentations. The schedule is on our website. That's a11y.club. You can see that there are 3 presentations scheduled, starting with Stephanie Eccles right in a couple of minutes. Presentations are roughly at the full hour always. I have to say that there should be and will be Vasilis van Gemert also speaking. He was at the Beyond Tellerrand conference yesterday, but he is going to do his talk remotely. He had to go back home. So we have 2 parts. The first part will be streamed like it's streamed right now. And for the second, that's for Stephanie's and Manuel's presentations. And Vasilis will do his presentation via Zoom. That means we will...
Possibly go wrong.
What could possibly go wrong? Yeah, well, we had a couple of troubles last time, but we tried to learn, or I think we learned a lot of that. So we're going to switch to Zoom at around 2 o'clock. So I'm going to announce this later as well. But for now, we are just streaming, and you're welcome. And I would like to pass on the microphone to you, Mark. Is there something? Yeah.
Just a quick look from me as well. We had a good couple of days right behind us, 2 good days and another good day coming. We are looking forward to some wonderful talks, and I hope the tech doesn't break. Good. And yeah, enjoy the day.
So, yeah, exactly. By the way, it's going to be kind of the deep dive versions of the talks we've seen yesterday, because all the 3 speakers, Stephanie, Manuel, and Vasilis, had their Beyond Tellerrand talk yesterday morning, and we asked them to. We asked them to do some more of the nerdy stuff today, or at least this is what they may do today if they want to. So we're really excited for these deep dive sessions today, kind of. And with that, I would like to hand over to Stephanie. Very pleased to have you here. We are going, it should be around 12:15 right now. Yeah, perfect. So, Stephanie, the stage is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody, here and on stream. My name is Stephanie Eccles. You can find me most places on the web, 5T3PH. And I'm going to be deep diving for sure on user Zoom and reflow. But I apologize if there's any glare on this screen for my dark slides here. So just a tiny bit about me. I have around 15 years of experience as a front-end focused developer. I've had a career journey that started in marketing and advertising, always as a developer, and then product and design systems. And I spend my time outside of work as a writer, speaker, instructor, podcast host, mom, and baker when I'm not in front of my computer. So desktop Zoom and reflow. This is a specific success criterion from WCAG 1410, titled simply reflow. And this is the term for supporting desktop Zoom up to 400%. The critical parts of this success criterion are that the content should reflow into a single column without loss of content or functionality, and without requiring scrolling in 2 dimensions. So those are the 2 key attributes to keep in mind as we continue through the content. So what does that really look like in practice? Well, if you dig into the success criterion, there's some additional information about what that behavior is at reflow. And very specifically, what the 400% is alluding to is assuming a 1280 pixel wide resolution, zoomed up to 400%. And at that dimension and at that zoom, we have a viewport that is equivalent to 320 CSS pixels wide. So let's compare that 320 pixel wide, and also it does have a height associated, 256 pixel high. Let's compare how that is in relation to how much space you have on a viewport of an iPhone. In this case, we're going to compare the iPhone SE, which is going to have a resolution of 375 wide by 667 pixels tall. So in portrait mode, the zoomed in viewport that we have available is roughly equivalent to the top half if we are in portrait orientation. And conversely, if we are in landscape orientation, it's sort of like the top left half, roughly. And the height is kind of equivalent in our landscape orientation, because if we consider this is the full dimensions of an iPhone screen, and so you also have browser Chrome that's coming in there. So that would kind of take up that extra space you see at the bottom. So a really important distinction is to reframe our expectations when we're considering a reflow context versus responsive design. So when we are talking about reflow, we really must remember that a user is on desktop and not a mobile device. And so when we design and consider this context, we're talking about rearranging, not removing content and functionality. And that goes back to those two attributes we saw directly from the criterion. And as we also just saw, the orientation we're dealing with is closer to landscape than portrait. Often when we talk about responsive design and we're considering a mobile context, we're considering our portrait orientation. This is the key takeaway. If you remember nothing else about the talk, it's that viewport size is not a proxy for device or user capabilities. So again, it's kind of difficult to understand that distinction between responsive and reflow, and because they are so linked, and you do get the responsive behavior when we trigger that reflow context. So when we have responsive design, the main thing we're considering there is media queries. And so interestingly, we have no Zoom dedicated media query. However, when we are using viewport-related media queries, any media queries that affect viewports less than or approaching 320 pixels are going to affect our reflow context. So, what's going to break when we're talking about reflow? There's a lot of common scenarios that can cause issues for this really high zoom context. So just a few that I thought of that I've encountered in my own experiences would be sticky navigation. So at that high zoom, it's going to cover half or maybe more of your viewport. And when we have a controlled, contained scroll area, if you haven't properly handled for that adapting, again, not just assuming a portrait landscape, you might cause scrolling in 2 dimensions. And that, again, is a specific part of the criterion that we're trying to avoid. We also can have unwanted results when using fluid typography techniques. That's a term you can Google later. We're not going to really dive into fluid typography today. And also just generally overflow and overlap issues that occur when you experience cutoff content. Finally, having spacing appearing too large relative to the content size. Now we're going to hone in on that area a little bit today. We also talked about it if you did attend Beyond Tellerrand, but we're just going to deep dive on it today. So with that in mind, the first section is about reflow and section spacing. So in other words, your large layout blocks that you may have on your page. So here's just an example rule where in the context of a section following another section, we're applying this margin top. And we've given it a very, very static value of 128 pixels. And so here's how that might look if we're at regular zoom, so 100% zoom, the default level. And in this context, if we imagine this is a desktop screen, it feels like an appropriate amount of space between content. But if we look at it zoomed up to that 400% level, you can see that that 128 pixels is equivalent to nearly half the available viewport height in this context. So there's really, that perception of potentially there's no other elements is one side effect that can occur. We kind of see one kind of peeking up in this context. But also just you have that extra scrolling. And persons who need this context may have low vision, they may have mobility impairments, and even some who already have this zoom way up high may also be additionally using magnification tools on top of that, which means their lens of their computer is even more reduced. So a kind of key concept here is that pixels are one unit that we're all familiar with, but we can upgrade that to some better options. And so let's just see a comparison. If we talk about pixels or rem, which are really static, versus a view height unit. So here's our pixels starting at normal 0%, or more correctly, 100% zoom. And you can see how with a height based on pixel units, by the time we get to that 400%, how, again, it's nearly half the available viewport area. And so we can compare that with the same element, but with height set to view heights. Now, just a quick caveat on this particular demo is that not really advocating setting a static height. We know that can cause overflow issues. We're using height in this context just to help illustrate the size difference when using these different units. So if we zoom in on, so to speak, of our use of view heights for 300% zoom versus 400% zoom, a few aspects here. We can see the difference of the actual calculated viewport size, and then also maybe see a little bit more of the difference of the rem or pixel value that is being computed. So it's kind of interesting to me. It was one of the kind of eye-opening moments for me to understand that when we enhance a zoom, that we're actually having those pixel values change as computed by the browser. And so that's why our media queries affect this context. So at 300% zoom, our 25 view height is computing to 87 pixels, and all the way up to 400%, that's computing to 65 pixels. So let's actually switch over to a demo, if my mouse will work. Oh, let's see. I have to back out of here. Okay. So here are just some starter section blocks, and I want to show kind of more real time the effect of adding these rules and improving the context. So right now I don't have any margin applied, so I'm just going to add in that basic margin here, that section plus section rule that we saw, starting off with that margin top of 128 pixels. And go over to this widescreen version. So I'm going to step it up to that 400% zoom. Now, my laptop screen, when it's fully enlarged browser window here, it's going to be a little bit larger than that 1280 that's in the criterion. I'm actually really interested to see that when they revise WCAG, if they'll decide to upgrade that minimum size that they expect. But so we compute to a little bit larger than 320 pixels wide once this gets all the way up. So that's at 200%, 250, and we see already just how much space that is taking up. 300, and finally 400. So again, just really emphasizing that that's half the viewport height. So if you had no distinction on your sections here, no properly color contrasted, background color or other way to indicate that there was more content, that's an additional barrier. So Let's reduce that back down and try out our alternate method here. Sorry, whenever I save, it expands these back out. Find where we're at. So instead of a margin top of 128 pixels, let's find the line there, we can do a margin top and let's see, I don't know if I have a slide on it, sorry. I did put these out of orders. Let me explain on my slide first. Sorry, I was rearranging these this morning. What we can do instead is we saw the impact of that 128 pixels. What we're going to do is upgrade our technique to use the CSS mathematical function of min. And so here's what our upgrade looks like as the code snippet. And then we'll just see a quick cross-section of the impact this makes, upgrading that for our margin. So the same rule we had before in terms of the sections, but we see how the alternative of our view height value is kicking in. The reason is we've given our min function still the 128 pixel value as one option, but also the 15 view height as another option. And based on the computed value for our context, which Zoom is impacting the context, the browser will choose the smaller of those two values to use. So that's really offering us a benefit here, where we see that by the time we get to that 400% zoom, we now are no longer taking up half the view height. We can clearly see the next item in view. We've reduced that unnecessary scrolling. So let's apply that over here to just a little bit better see it in action. So it's that min function. And we'll go ahead and give it the values that we showed on the slide of 128 pixels and 15 view height. Go back out to our demo and step it up to see the difference. You can already see, you can kind of maybe see at least the area between our elements compressing actually. It's kind of an interesting effect. And since I'm in the browser now as well, I'll go ahead and we can do a little check on this and find out what the actual computed value here is. I'll zoom in my DevTools. So in DevTools, I've just selected this second section element so that the rule is actually kicking in. I'm going to go over to the computed tab, and we can actually learn then what that actual value is. So in this case, our view height is computing to 37 pixels. So almost 100 pixels savings of reducing that unnecessary scroll height. Now, this isn't going to be appropriate for all contexts. There are, of course, instances where that space is serving maybe a little bit more of a purpose. But in text flow content, if you have another meaningful way to separate content, which, in my opinion, headings count, right? So reducing that space, making it more contextual for this environment is a worthwhile upgrade. Cool, so let's see what else we have for the next example here. So that was margin, like the impact of margin on general layout block spacing. Another context to consider would be element padding. So again, if we have a card that we're developing, so a contained unit usually has its own border and other kind of defining features for its boundaries. One of the critical things would be its own padding. So very static value here, 1.5 rem. And again, we're going to upgrade this, but this time we're going to use the CSS function of clamp. And clamp is another mathematical related function, but this time it has 3 values and they have a specific order. This first value is going to be the minimum size we'll allow. The middle needs to be an ideal size, some sort of dynamic value. And the reason it's dynamic is that we can transition from the first value of minimum to the third value, which is a maximum allowed size. So that 5% is going to be based on the inline size of this element. That's how padding behaves, with or without the clamp function. And so if we consider a card then, just a super basic card, this is how it looks at 400% zoom. And what we've done is we've gained back just a little bit extra inline space for readability. And again, we can go ahead and look at that a little more real time in our demo. I'm gonna comment out our main element here. if CodePin behaves. All right, so here's just our really basic content, maybe. Oh, I forgot I had a nested comment in there. That's why that wasn't working. All right, so here's our extremely basic card element. And we have that padding in here as just a static value. And of course, it's the only element on the page. Usually we'd have kind of a grid of cards, and that's going to further impact the padding and other behaviors. But if we just kind of hone in on our card and get it to where it's kind of hitting the boundaries, which I am going to make this a little more realistic to our 1280. Then here's 250, 300, and finally 400. Since I already have my computed tab open here, we'll update. So 24 pixels. Now we defined it in rims, and so we have to kind of do that conversion there. I'm actually still getting the 150, but if we were, I might not have the viewport at 1280 here. So depending on your values, you may get a gain here. But especially when you have multiple elements and you're aligning them in columns, I just rushed my demo this morning, you know, you can have a real impact on the available inline space, the reading experience, and potentially reduce some overflow if you do have longer content that's being nested in these cards, like if you have data information, or if you're even trying to nest tables. It might not be a card, but whatever sort of containing element you have, whatever kind of gains you can give back to that you know, horizontal space will really make a difference on that user experience. All right. So let's see. So beyond just kind of worrying about the layout and those really kind of micro upgrades you can do, focusing on the CSS, we're also concerned in this context about preventing loss of content and functionality. So once again, to really hammer this point home, don't remove functionality based on viewport size alone. Interestingly, I had this happen to me a little while ago when I was simply trying to use two applications in split screen mode. And the one application I was using had a little more functionality. They were basing that on only viewport size. So if I got down to basically below a tablet size, I couldn't do what I needed to do. And that was just based on the half of my screen, not even a Zoom context. And when you do that, you're preventing users who are actually in the Zoom context and don't have mobile features from completing their task. So instead, do use responsive rearranging. So for example, stacking sidebars in your main column, those general responsive behaviors that don't lose critical content. So some potentially acceptable collapsing methods. I say potentially because I know that I'm in a position where we have regular accessibility audits. These have been acceptable. I'm willing to be challenged or also you know, offer other solutions or entertain other solutions. And they're not going to be appropriate for every circumstance. But sometimes, in order to prevent that two-dimensional scrolling, we do have to further compress content. We just don't want to lose it. So if we just need to further compress content, sometimes accordions can be appropriate. The critical thing is to make sure that they are clearly retain a connection back to the original arrangement. So clearly identifying use of labels and things like that. And then another kind of more classic behavior that we attribute to responsive design would be collapsing larger menus into drop-downs or providing another full screen experience. Just those things that if we actually left them expanded, they would actually become more of a barrier in that expanded state. And again, data tables are probably the trickiest thing to deal with. You may know that from just a general mobile context, but especially considering the two-dimensional scrolling as a specific call-out for this criterion. And we likely can't completely avoid it for data tables. One solution you may consider is if you're able to somewhat pre-filter those tables, some method to reduce the number of columns. And again, not always practical, and if it produces a worse user experience, perhaps you'll have to just make sure that that two-dimensional scrolling is clearly obvious, that that's necessary, and work on some other methods to make that as easy as possible. So additional barriers to remove or reduce in this context, modals, it makes me laugh. I have both modals and tooltips. So even on mobile, these are annoying. They're often triggered by hover, or they just overall, we have that experience of them reducing the available area on the screen to complete our task, and that further shrinking of available reading space. So for modals, we also, we have to consider that we have a reduced height as well. Just all these factors really decrease the user experience in this context. And also tooltips, as I mentioned, sometimes there's additional magnification in use. So when you already are trying to delicately move around, read the content on your screen, and then you're triggering this thing that is temporary, it's just another barrier to actually completing your task. And also reducing the dimensions of large media. So what I mean by this is if you're using big, fancy photos for your marketing context, those can produce a significant scrolling height in a Zoom context. And I'm gonna demo in a minute ways you can reduce the impact of that without having to lose your media entirely. And finally, reducing and removing unnecessary text overlap. Again, might have a design flair on your site where you're using blocks of text overlaid onto content. But if that's significantly reducing the available reading line length, maybe consider adjusting that for the smaller view. So yeah, I wanted to specifically look at the media context here. I'm gonna bring back our sections here, this time with an image. There we go. We got our gray tabby cat looking out a window with yellow-hued spectacles on, looking too cool for school. That's our friend here. And again, in a desktop context, feels perfectly fine. Doesn't even stand out as the least bit, an abnormal scenario here. But as you know, I'm going to start zooming in here. He's already filling the height at 150%, 200, 250, 300, 400. Oh goodness, this is just not necessary, right? So fortunately, we have, again, some modern CSS tools that we can use. We don't have to lose our image. We don't have to worry about our designers or whoever providing a whole bunch of image sizes or worrying about some sort of fancy CMS plugin. We can handle this in just our CSS. So here's our happy little image here. Ultimately, I'd probably want to add a utility class or something, but we're just going to put it directly on the element today. So our first property here is object fit cover. Now, it's not going to have an immediate effect, but we're going to adjust the dimensions of this image. And object fit cover is going to make the image element act like a container for the image contents. The effect will be that the image will behave as a background image. And so it will be allowed to enlarge without being squashed or stretched. So that's our first step. And we'd already had on here a max width of 100%. That's kind of our standard responsive image technique, which allows it to compress narrowly. But since this is a portrait image, we didn't even see that happening yet, even when we were all the way up to 400% zoom. So in order for this object fit to actually take hold, we need to give it a little bit more dimension information. So in this case, we want our image to maintain its own natural dimensions, its own natural aspect ratio, as long as possible. Because if we consider that maybe this is a CMS environment, our authors are throwing whatever content they need to in here, they expect that to display fully if they're looking at it on a desktop. So we just want to make a change for our Zoom context. So this takes a little bit of trial and error. You might end up with a few utility classes, but as a starting point, I'm going to put a max height. Let's go with 40 view height. Okay, so we did actually see a change here. And the goal here is that we don't want to affect it too much here. We might see a very small reduction depending on your desktop size. But once again, the impact we're really trying to affect is Zoom. So I think it ended up with 60. So you can see pretty much immediately it's already staying consistent on that 60 view height. And I definitely would argue, again, we haven't lost the image, we haven't lost what it contributes to the content. We've just made the overall user experience here a little bit better. And conveniently, this is going to apply in a true mobile context as well, which I would say is kind of a nice behavior as well. So you're not taking up that full mobile screen. Now, you'll probably want to layer different image techniques on top of this. This is still going to produce a download of the full image size. It doesn't affect anything related to that. It's strictly the visual presentation that we are improving here. All right. That was my last major demo. I probably went a little too fast there. But I'm definitely open to questions, or we can demo a few more things if you have specific questions. Oh, now that I say that, I have one more context to just quickly demonstrate. I'm going to leave our main element in here. I just wanted to show how even the most simple navigation element that is set to sticky position really covers our viewport. I'm going to give myself a few more, a bit more content so we have more scrolling space to work with here. Take us out of mobile. Okay, so at normal 100% zoom, so haven't adjusted my zoom yet, our nav is going to compute to a height of 50 pixels. So that's our normal height. Let's see how even 50 pixels really starts to cover the viewport when I get all the way up. So there's 400%. And the problem, of course, is that it's sticky, and so it's always going to be there and always going to take part of my viewport height away. Now, this one's a little trickier context to deal with because what's our key point? We don't want to use the viewport size as a proxy for user or device capabilities. So if we're only going on viewport size and saying that's enough to drop our sticky functionality, that might not always be appropriate if it diminishes a user's ability to complete some sort of task. So maybe it's not a sticky navigation, but maybe like in a email app, it's the only way you can get to the compose button, which we can talk about if that's the correct solution anyway. But just being aware of what the impact is here. And I know we've all experienced news sites where you have all sorts of things covering your viewport. So if you had that experience all the time, even with what seems like simple, not evil solutions, like just a simple sticky nav, that really impacts your ability to explore the web and just for simple basic content. What's tricky about the nav situation is we also know that a kind of complementary success criterion when we're talking about Zoom is being able to zoom text up to 200%. So you might think, oh, maybe we'll just restrict the size of the text at a certain point. But these users at 400% zoom, their intent is really to enlarge everything. So we don't want to restrict the text size. I did have a static value in here on my padding of just 1 rem. So you could try to do a little bit of detecting there, use our clamp idea, and maybe at least reduce the vertical height. So we're not touching text size, but we're still giving the user back a little more usable space. But yeah, just really wanted to bring this up and call awareness to it, because as we know, if you're using a sticky nav, you might also have a logo in here, all sorts of things. It's more than likely going to be a lot taller than this extremely simple version that I have displayed here. So, which again, I'm not saying sticky position is evil, just be mindful of the consequences of using it. But yeah, so that is the last demo I have. This is, part of this material comes from my XCon talk, so I have a demo page that you can find. I'll make that a little bit larger here. If you want to explore it, it does the calculations of, actually I have that open. It does the calculations if you want to kind of experiment more, if you have somebody in mind that you want to send this to show them the difference between pixels versus view heights. So it computes it as you zoom in to really emphasize that difference. And it also lets you know what your current viewport size computes to. So if you're trying to think of this in a media query way, I know that's kind of difficult to separate those things if you're someone who's done a lot of media query-based responsive design. So you can kind of see the change in that as well a little bit easier. And then it also has the demos for our sections. So again, seeing the impact of those, and that very simple card example as well. But yeah, I am definitely open for questions or doing a couple more demos if we would like, so. Yes.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Okay, thanks a lot, Stephanie. That was great. What about questions? What about questions in the room? It's a bit complicated to gather questions from live stream at the moment, so I rely on you. Anything you want to ask Stephanie about what she just showed us?
I just want to say thank you for the great presentation.
Manuel,
Thanks.
just give me a second, Manuel.
Makes sense. Sorry. No, it's fine. I have no questions. I just want to say thank you for the great presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? I actually didn't watch the live stream. Have there been questions? Shep, could you? Okay, that's.
Also, thank you from my side. Super interesting. I was wondering if when I never tried zooming to 400% my desktop screen, but I wonder if, for example, on Windows you have these scroll bars which are omnipresent. I wonder if these are being zoomed as well, because I would imagine that people that need a zoom would also need the zoom on the browser Chrome, and that might also then impact your design as well.
Yeah, good question about impact of Zoom. I have tested, I work on a PC for my day job, and I have seen the same behavior as we saw here in my Mac environment, where if you are focused into the browser context, it's going to just perform zoom on. But to your point, yes, they may also have OS settings applied, which would further restrict their available viewing height. Yeah, really excellent point. And now that you say that, that's probably where the 1280 comes in, is they're calculating in the additional Chrome of the browser and other applications. Yeah, very good point.
Thank you. Any more questions in the room? I just checked the live stream. There are no questions so far.
Okay.
So I would say thanks a lot for
Certainly.
this presentation. Stephanie will be around a little bit, right?
Oh yeah,
So,
I'll stay for the event.
please take your chance to talk to her. We're going to have a short break now. Next presentation will be in about 20 minutes, a little bit more than 20 minutes. By the way, sorry for, especially the people on the live stream, sorry for the inconvenience. We had some trouble with the live stream in the beginning and had to refresh the URL. So, but hopefully there have been a couple of people on the live stream, so it seemed to work. And be back in 20 minutes around. Then it's going to be Manuel. He will dive into HTML validation, as far as I know. Very much looking forward to that one. Yeah, take yourself, get yourself a cup of coffee or something, or a tea. Refresh yourself. See you back in 20 minutes. Thank you.
Check. Hier kommt der Typ, der meist viel zu stoned rappt.
Okay, so we are live again. Welcome back, second session of our meetup. This is Manuel Matuzovic. He probably is going to introduce himself, and I don't know if you've seen him speak at Beyond Tellerrand yesterday, and I really, really enjoyed that one. Hope you did too. It was a nice one, and I know that he's got a lot of things more to tell us today, even nerdier stuff. He announced that he's probably going a bit over schedule. We actually planned like 45 minutes. He said I will have to stop him at an hour or something, but I think it's definitely worth the time. So very much looking forward to that, Manuel. The stage is yours.
Thank you.
Manuel Matuzovic.
Hello. Thanks a lot for the nice introduction, and also thanks for having me again. I spoke at Accessibility Club, I think, 3 years ago, and last time I spoke about accessible React apps, and I had a proper presentation, and I was well prepared, and it was well structured. And this time it's a bit different because Yoshi approached me and he said, "Hey, you're in Düsseldorf, do you want to speak again?" And I said, "Yes, but I don't have anything that I could present." And he said, "It's fine, just talk about stuff that interests you, stuff that you're thinking about right now. It doesn't have to be that structured, so please don't expect a well-prepared presentation." I have some slides, but I put them together on the train on the way to Düsseldorf, so it's nothing fancy, but I have a few things that keep my brain going at the moment, and I'm thinking a lot about these things, and that's what I want to share with you today. So yesterday was Beyond Tellerrand, and I gave a talk about HTML, and my talk, Lost in Translation, was basically about me learning based on my experience that most accessibility issues are related to and caused by HTML, and this is what I talked about, and I also try to list a few reasons for that. And I said that we just suck at HTML. That's pretty much the essence, but I have also more reasons. And some of that is based on my experience, but also I use some data to back the things that I'm saying. And I quoted a lot the WebAIM 1 Million report. And the WebAIM 1 Million report is a evaluation created by WebAIM. WebAIM is a non-profit, and they focus on web accessibility. They share articles and all kinds of different learning materials. They also have a accessibility testing tool called Wave, and they do screen reader surveys and all kinds of really valuable stuff, and they have this evaluation. So every year, starting with 2019, they check the top 1 million websites, and they run automated tests on these sites, and then they gather all kinds of information, and they try to get a feeling and an understanding of the quality of these top 1 million websites. And in the report, they share the results. So first they introduce you to the evaluation and the methodology, and they also explain the sample they're using and how they're testing. So they're using their own testing tool called Wave, or the engine that powers Wave, to test these things. And I just quickly want to look at this page because it's really interesting. There's so much that you can get from that. It's not just numbers for me. This is inspiration. This is what I don't know, sparks something in me, and then creates a lot of output. Or I'm able to create a lot of output by looking at things like these. And this is the same for other people as well. I've mentioned some articles yesterday written by Hide de Vries and Christian Heilmann, who also wrote something based on these results. And one of the interesting things that we can see here, that they found an average of 50.8 errors per page. 50 errors in average on the 1 million websites they tested. That's kind of a lot, I would say. And what's interesting is here that they also define the term error. They say errors are wave-detected accessibility barriers having notable end-user impact. So it's not just stuff that is like a bad practice and that you shouldn't do, but like really stuff that has impact on the end user. That's important to mention. There's some more stuff, and one of the most interesting numbers here is that they found issues on 96.8% of websites. Quite a lot, I would say. When I first heard about the WebAIM 1 million report, I was like, I bet they found errors on a very large percentage of websites, something like 55 or maybe 60. But then I saw, the first time I saw 97.8%, and that's just way too much. The good thing though is the percentage decreased. So in 2019 it was 97.8%, and now it's 96.8%. So 1% less. Yeah, I mean, it's a nice thing, definitely. Okay, and if you, I won't go into the rest, but you see the most common issues. I talked about that in my talk yesterday, but you can check it out online. And they also share some details about the different types of errors that they found. And yes, pretty interesting stuff. Also a great learning resource, I would say. But what inspired me, or what like started this thinking process, was this incredibly large number. Like 96.8% of websites have detected WCAG 2.0 failures. And I was thinking, why is this number so high? Why like such an incredibly high number? And like I said earlier, I mean, we're really bad at HTML. That's one of the reasons. We are really bad at HTML, and we are especially bad at ARIA, the specification that we also love for creating amazing JavaScript stuff. But this is just one reason that we should probably know this stuff better. And another reason must be, and that's like my theory, must be related to testing, that we don't know how to test things, or that we should test things, because these errors are detectable. Wave or WebAIM, they didn't use some very top secret testing tool that no one other has access to test these things. No, this stuff is publicly available. They pretty much just pressed the button. I mean, of course, they did more here with testing 1 million websites, but that's what you can do. You can use their tool. It's publicly available. It's for free. You press a button, and you will get the same results. So we all can do that. And I wonder why it's not happening. And the thing is, we're, or at least I'm, but I guess also some of you who are watching and who are in this room, we are in this accessibility bubble, in this really teeny tiny accessibility bubble. And if you look around on social media and events like these, it seems like everyone knows something or quite a lot about web accessibility. So my assumption is always everyone knows how to test accessibility, because I'm in this bubble, I consume content online, and I see how everyone knows a lot, and also so much more than I do. And if we look at the mother bubble, like a bit bigger bubble, which is the web development or front-end bubble, there's even more information. So when I surf on the web, or when I talk to people, when I go to events, I always have this feeling that everyone knows something about accessibility and security and performance and user experience. We're all just so well educated, and we all write articles, we watch talks, and we consume articles, we read them, we go to workshops, we create workshops, and everyone is just so involved and invested that it seems like everyone knows everything. But the reality is, outside of this bubble, there's a much huger bubble of people that don't do that. And it seems obvious, of course. There are much more people who are not that involved, who don't read that much, who don't attend events, who just work, which is absolutely fine. It's like a 9-to-5 job. Yes, create websites, don't go to conferences. You don't have to do that stuff. You don't have to be that involved. And I believe that this huge group of people, they might not know as much as this teeny tiny bubble. Again, that's obvious, but yeah, sometimes we need, or I need to remind myself of that, especially in terms when we think about the audience we're talking to. So what I want to do today is I want to show you how to test websites, or how I test websites and the tools I'm using. or at least some of the tools. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but maybe some of you get inspired by the things that I'm showing you. Maybe I'm showing you things that you don't know, and you might even present those things to colleagues who maybe don't read that much on social media or go to conferences or read articles and so on. That's the first thing. And the second thing is I also started to think about testing and how to get into accessibility testing. I haven't finished that yet. I'm not smart enough to really to sort all these thoughts that I have in my head yet, but and I guess I need some time. And I'm trying to figure out if there are easier ways to get into accessibility testing than using the tools that I'm going to show you. So like a even easier and lower and smoother start to get into tooling. Yes, that's what I'm going to do now. And let's start with one of the tools that I'm using, one of my favorite tools. It's called DevTools. It's a browser extension. You can install it in Firefox and in Chrome and in Edge. It's built by DQ, and it's based on a tool called Xcore. So behind the extension is behind the extension is a JavaScript file. That's it. It's a JavaScript file, and you can use the extension and do some testing. But if you want to, it's on GitHub. You can check it out. You can just use the JavaScript file itself. You can include it in your website if you want to. Please don't use it in production. You don't want to run these tests in production, only in your development environment. And it's a JavaScript. There's a JavaScript API, there are some methods, and they will throw errors. But you can also use it in Node if you want to. Or if you are scared of user interfaces, you can use it on the command line. That's also fine. Or you can use it in your continuous deployment, in your pipeline, if you want to. There are different ways of using this. For me, the most convenient way is the browser extension. And I have installed that in my Firefox browser. And I'm going to use it on a random website. I picked the website of the city of Düsseldorf because we're in Düsseldorf. I hope that nobody of you built that website. I mean, it's fine. Then you're getting free consulting, which is also great. So yeah, let's just run a test. And the way it works is that you open DevTools. So you can right-click on the page and select Inspect. Where is it? Yes, Inspect. Or there are also shortcuts. On Mac, it's Command Option I. And in DevTools, with the browser extension installed, you will find a new panel called DevTools. If you install the extension, you might have to restart Firefox in order for the tab to show up. And this is how it looks like. It looks a bit different in Chrome. So if you use it in Chrome, there are more buttons because for some reason there's a difference. What's important to say is Xcore is for free. You can use it for free. But there's also a paid version. And the paid version offers you some more options like saving results and sharing results, comparing results, and importing them in different tools. They also have more tools like Xmonitor, where you can run tests on multiple sites and so on. And they also have guided testing, which means that, automated tests like this means I press a button and they give me errors. That's it. But they also have guided testing. By the way, I'm not selling here. I'm not working for them. They have guided testing, which means that you run these tests, but they will also explain what these things mean and the next thing that you have to do, and they will also explain you how to test manually. So it's pretty great. Yeah, but it also costs I think $50 a month. So yeah. I would suggest that you first start with the free thing, see if you can work with that, and then you can consider doing something else. Anyways, in Chrome, you see more of the pro stuff in the UI, so that's the only difference. All right, I will just scan all of my page. This is just a single button, and I will press this, and then X runs some tests, and it takes the visible part of the viewport. So if I decrease the width of the viewport and I run another test, the number of issues might be different because there are other elements visible in the viewport. So this confused me at the beginning, but then I realized, okay, it tests what's visible on the screen. All right, let's try again. Okay, now it's 77. Doesn't matter. So I run this test, and then X tells me there are 77 issues. And this seems like a high number. But I've seen websites with 500 issues or even 4 digits. And this looks like a lot, but it doesn't necessarily to be that critical, because it doesn't list 77 different types of issues, but the affected elements on the page. So it's about the 77 elements affected on this page. So it might happen if you fix one thing that all of a sudden 50 errors are gone because they're related to the same issue. And you can see that these issues are categorized by severity. So there's critical, serious, moderate, and minor. And there are also some issues that need review. What X is trying is they are trying to avoid false positives. So they want to make sure that everything that they report is actually an issue. And sometimes they're not sure if this thing they're reporting is actually really an issue. And usually this happens with low contrast or with text on background images. So we see this in the slide here. There's text on an image, and X just isn't sure if the contrast is enough, because it's hard to figure out if there's an image in the background and not just a solid color. And usually the issues that need review are related to that kind of stuff. Yes, so we have a list of all the issues. If I click on, for example, 7 right next to critical, it will only list the 7 critical issues. And what's also really interesting is there is a best practices toggle. So I can toggle best practices on and off, and you can see the number changing, which means that now I'm only listing issues that are relevant for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So critical stuff that you need for an audit. But if I turn it off, it also includes some best practices that you could fix, but you don't have to according to the guidelines. I would recommend that you always turn on the best practices, because there's some interesting stuff that you get from that. All right, and then we have the issues on the page, and what's really nice about it, they will tell you which element is affected. They will also show you the source, and they will say, hey, that's what you have to do. So for example, here it says, ensure ARIA attributes are allowed on an element's role. So it seems like this website is using ARIA on an element where it's not allowed. And then it says, ARIA attribute is not allowed, ARIA expanded false. Okay, so I know what's going on, or I have an idea. Then I can click on highlight, which is really nice. Then it will highlight the element affected in the user interface, so I'd see what I'm working with which element. And I can inspect it, which will bring me directly into the elements panel. And I can see now that they're using ARIA expanded false on a div. And that's not allowed. Like ARIA expanded only works on certain elements, like a button, for example, or I think on menu items. But it just doesn't make sense on a div, because a div is just nothing. It has no semantic meaning, so you don't want to put an ARIA attribute on a div. And that's pretty much how it works. That's kind of it. You have this list of issues, and you read it, and if you understand it, then you're probably able to fix it and debug it. If not, what's great about XDevTools, or about what the Q built here, is that there is a more info button or link. No, it's not a button, it's a link, because it will see, I get confused with these things. Yeah, HTML is complicated, web development is complicated. It's a link because it brings you to a new page. And they have this website called the Q University. Now that I'm talking, they should pay me for this. Like, I'm really selling that right now. They have this site, the Q University, where they explain all the issues, and they will tell you to which WCAG criterion it's related. And also they will tell you the disabilities affected, and yeah, give you some code examples. It's just a great learning resource. I use this to learn about accessibility and accessibility testing, because they're doing a great job of like concisely describing what's important here. Yeah, maybe one more important thing. So for example, let's see, there are a bunch of elements that must have sufficient color contrast, 38 of them. And on the right side here, below the list of issues, you can see a pagination. So you can browse through all the affected elements in this type of error. So as I'm pressing the button here, you can see how this highlighting beautiful pink border or shadow jumps from element to element. So it's a really convenient way of debugging. I like that. Okay, that's the first tool, one of my favorites. Then there's another tool in Chrome, built into Chrome DevTools, Lighthouse. It comes with the browser, so you don't have to download anything. And again, you can use Lighthouse in all kinds of different ways. It's in the browser, in DevTools. But there's also a command line interface version, a Node version, CI version, and there's also even a browser version on web.dev/measure. You just paste the URL and it will give you a result. So that's also a nice way of testing, and you don't need DevTools, and you can also share the results with others. What's great about Lighthouse is there are all kinds of different tests. So it's not just accessibility, but also best practices, SEO, performance, and PWA, so progressive web app stuff. And you can test all these things to get a basic idea of the quality of your website, and also even a more advanced idea of the quality. And Lighthouse is actually using Xcore as well. So it's using the same engine that powers the XDevTools, but it's only using a subset of the rules. So it's very likely that XDevTools will find more than Lighthouse. So let's run a test. You can decide whether you want to run it on a desktop viewport or mobile. The difference is not just the viewport, but also that the connection will be throttled on mobile to make it more realistic. The network and also the GPU, CPU. I'm really bad with computers, I don't know, like the performance of the device. Things you shouldn't say in a presentation about web development. I'm really bad with computers. Okay, so this is what you get. You get some results for each category, and now the number is not the number of issues, but it's a score between 0 and 100. 100 means perfect. And 0 means, yeah, there are some things that you should do probably on this website. So let's look at the accessibility issues. The first one is buttons do not have an accessible name. Oh, I didn't know that that was a thing in web, that some buttons don't have an accessible name. So let's see. I can toggle that open. Sorry, that was sarcasm. It doesn't always work. So you can see the screenshots of the affected elements, which is really convenient. So it's a bit different, just the user interface is different, but it's basically doing the same thing. And I can click it, and it will bring me to this element in DevTools. And a nice trick here is you can right-click the element and click on Scroll into View, which will then scroll the affected element into view, because it might be somewhere deeper down on the page. And we can see here we have this play button on these teasers, and the button is just a button, which is great. But there's no text, so it doesn't have an accessible name, and this is what Lighthouse told us. You have to add text here. Okay, that's nice. Let's see. Image elements do not have alt attributes. Classic. Oh, and this one, user scalable no is used in the meta name viewport element on or the attribute. So what's happening here is that they're preventing users from zooming into the page on mobile, and I see this on a lot of websites recently. It seems to be a trend. I don't know why. Maybe it's in some boilerplate code or something like that. But I see this on so many websites, and this is really bad because you can't zoom the page, and all of us at some point need to zoom a page on mobile. And so they set maximum scale to 1, or they set user scalable no, or both. So you can see that there are all kinds of different issues, and this is really nice. Let's see. Lists do not contain only list item elements. Also interesting. Let's see what's happening. Okay, so there's an unordered list, and it contains some list items, but also an H4. And the H4 is not allowed in the UL element. There are only, as far as I know, 3 elements allowed in the UL: the list item, the template element, and the script element, as far as I know. Yeah, I mean, easy fix. You just move the headline out of the list and it's fine. But what's interesting about that is I found this issue, and this brought me to another really interesting thing here, which is that, you know what, I'm going to use the scroll into view feature, which is that there are 6 nav elements for the list here in the footer. And I mean, yes, could be fine to do that. Maybe it could also be just a single nav element. I'm not sure about having a separate nav element for each list because I think they're grouped together. But okay, it's fine. That was their decision. What I don't like about that is that these navigation elements are not labeled. And I will show you why this is an issue. Just a second. I will just quickly switch to Safari. And where is it? Yes, here it is. And I'm going to use VoiceOver, the built-in screen reader on macOS. And I will show you why these unlabeled nav elements might be a problem. I hope that you can hear audio on the stream. You probably don't hear audio. Yeah, okay. There's no audio, but it's fine. Okay. So in VoiceOver, there's this thing called the rotor, and I can list all kinds of different elements on the page. For example, I have this nice overview of the headings on this page. There are a lot of headings with all kinds of different levels. I see room for improvement here, but let's just skip that. There are the form controls. And this happens when you don't label your buttons. It just says button, but you don't know what kind of button it is, so you want to label that button. And with the landmarks, we get this. So you see there's a banner landmark. This is the header on the page. This is great, fine. And then usually there's only one header, and there just should be one header. But then you see there's a navigation, another navigation. Then there's the main element, the main content of the page, and some more navigations. And navigation, like a lot of navigations, and the problem here is I can't tell them apart. I don't know what kind of navigation it is. So what you want to do here is to put ARIA label, for example, on each navigation and just explain what it is. Or in this specific example, you could even use ARIA labeled by and use the headings that are already here and reference them on the nav. So you could put an ID on the heading, and then use ARIA labeled by on the list and reference the heading, so the navigation will be labeled by the heading that's already visible in the page. But that's not really the topic for today, but that's what I meant, that it might take a bit longer because I'm just speaking. Okay. So let's switch to Chrome. Yeah, that's Lighthouse. And what I also suggest is you don't just use the accessibility test. Also look at best practices and SEO. You might find some interesting stuff in there. So if you look at the best practices, there's nothing interesting, okay? But SEO, it says links are not crawlable. Interesting. Let's look at this link. Scroll into view. Okay, so there is a link. It has an href attribute. Great, I like that about links. But the href attribute is empty. And the thing is, they're using it for the buttons on the slider. And just like I said, it's a button because you perform some kind of JavaScript action, and usually you use a link in most of the time to navigate to a different page or to an anchor within your page. But these things just change the slide, so you want to use a button here. And what I really like about that, it's in the SEO section. So it's really easy to sell. You go to your boss and you tell them, we have some serious search engine issues. We need to fix that right now. We're going to lose so much money. And while you're at it, you're fixing accessibility, which is really great. So you don't need extra budget and you don't need to convince anyone. Yes, that's Lighthouse. And I also want to show you one nice feature about Lighthouse. So if you're running it locally on your local machine and you want to share the results, there's an easy way to do that. You can see the kebab menu right on the top right here. Some people call it kebab menu, I don't know. And there is a viewer, open in viewer, and it will open the Lighthouse results in a browser. You can't share that. But what you can do is you can, again, click on another kebab icon, and you can say save as gist. And if I do that, you can see how it's saving the report, and now the URL has changed, and this is now shareable. And what Lighthouse is doing here is it's connected to GitHub. So before the presentation, I've logged into GitHub. And if I visit my gists here, you can see that the results of the test are now saved as a JSON file on my GitHub, and it uses this file to display the results. So this is now shareable with your colleagues. And what's great about the viewer is that you can switch the language. So let's take Croatian, for example, and then you can share it as a Croatian result and a different language, which is really convenient. And you can also just open the viewer, and I've never done that, but you can copy the JSON and paste it into the viewer. Maybe you want to save results as JSON and then parse them in a different tool, and there's all kinds of things that you can do with the JSON file. Really convenient. All right, the next tool that I want to show you is called Accessibility Insights by Microsoft. It's available as an extension for Chrome and Edge, unfortunately not Firefox. And when you install Accessibility Insights for web, you get this nice little blue heart icon in your browser, and you can do all kinds of things. And especially for beginners, what's really interesting is the assessment. It's guided testing, so it directs you to this page, and you can just run automated checks. And again, I think it's also using Xcore as far as I know. So you run tests and it will give you the results. It will list all the things. It will explain how to test these things and what's wrong about it. It will reference the elements. And what's great about that, once you've checked all the automatic stuff and you've fixed that, you can then test manually. So for example, using the keyboard, and they will explain how to test certain things with the keyboard. So it's guided testing. It's just text. You have to read it, unfortunately, so it's not very visual, but it's great for beginners because they explain all the steps that you have to take to test. Yes, that's great. What's also great, they have these ad hoc tools, which is nice. So you can run all the automated checks here, and they will annotate the elements where they found issues using this red button with the exclamation mark. And yeah, there's also one interesting thing here. So when you click that, a modal window pops up and it lists all the issues and suggestions. You can see it's pretty much the same information we got from Lighthouse or X. And you can copy the failure details and paste it into an issue. So all the information there, you can just copy and paste it and create a ticket on Jira, whatever. Some kind of issue tracker. Or you can say file an issue. You click the button, go to settings. Okay. No. I'm in the. Why isn't this connected? Okay. No, I messed it up. Doesn't matter. You can connect Accessibility Insights to your GitHub account to a specific repository, and when you press that button, it will open that repository. It will open the Create New Issue page and pre-fill the title and the value with this information. I really want to show that. Let me just quickly, let's try. I'm really bad at typing live. Okay, no, it's, let's try. Let's just take my repository. Let's see if it works. So I'm in the settings here. Okay, that's the reason. Fine. Like I said, not well prepared. So let's click this, file issue, yes. And now it opens this repository that I defined in the settings, and it pre-fills the issue, which is really great. I like that. It works with GitHub and Azure boards. I have no idea what Azure boards is, but similar to, also some issue tracking thing, I guess. Yeah, some of the other features are, oh no, that's wrong. Some of the other features are, for example, you can remove the color and test if your website works without color, which is really great. That's a nice test. I like that. You can annotate the headings on the page, so you can see where there's an H1 and H2. It's just a really great way of debugging the document outline. Just a nice overview. Works pretty well visually. And you can do the same thing for landmarks. So this is also a nice way of identifying the many navigations that I saw in the footer earlier. And one of my favorite features is this tab stops. If you want to test the site manually using the keyboard, you can use Accessibility Insights to track what you're doing, to track the key presses. So as I'm pressing tab, nothing happens because this is a live demo and things are not supposed to work in a live demo. Okay, let me try again. Tab stops, come on. It's loading. By the way, while I'm at it, let me sell something. So I have a workshop with Smashing Magazine where I talk about these things, but just way more. 5 sessions, each 2.5 hours. So if you're interested in that stuff, check out the Smashing Magazine website. There will be a workshop in September, I think, again, where I talk about these things, and we take a really deep dive into testing and also manual testing. And yes, Accessibility Insights doesn't like me today, so I'm not going to show you this. So you have to buy the workshop to learn about these things. I'm so sorry. Okay. Maybe it works later, I don't know. So these are my favorite tools. These are the tools that I'm using. There's some more, of course, and other tools that are also great. And the thing is, it's kind of like the entry barrier is low. You just install an extension, you press a button, and you get information. But I can imagine that maybe it's not that easy, because for me it also took some time to learn these things. Like watching me click around is like, yeah, okay, that makes sense, and that's super easy. And then you debug that, and then you find an issue, and you go home early, and everything is perfect. But no, I have a lot of experience with these things, and that's why it might look easy, but it takes some time to learn these things. And I was thinking, is there another way, an easier way to get into accessibility testing without having to learn something new, with just by using something that we are familiar with tooling that we already know? And like I said, I didn't finish thinking about this because, yeah, right now my ideas are pretty limited. The only thing that I came up with is HTML validation. I thought, okay, wait a minute. When I was in school and I learned HTML, I mean, I learned it before school, but in school, my teacher also taught us HTML. He always said, you have to tidy your HTML. And I was like, what? There's a tool called HTML tidy, so you tidy up your HTML, so you have to tidy. He taught us HTML, but he also said you have to validate your page, because this is important. You have to make sure that the HTML you wrote is valid, that it's that you're following the rules of the language. And for me, this is normal. Like everything that I write, I run validation just to make sure that I didn't make any mistakes. And my assumption was, well, I guess that everyone knows that and uses that. Like it's like one of the most basic tools, and it's been around since forever. And but of course, I wasn't sure if this is the thing, because if we all know how validation works, we're already familiar with this tool, and this tool can help us with accessibility issues. It will tell us about some accessibility issues on the page. So I went on Twitter in preparation for this talk, and I asked, do you validate your HTML using the W3C validator, HTML validate, or a similar tool before you launch a site or part of a site? And a little bit more than 400 people participated in this survey, and 39.9% said yes, which is great. And 52% said no. And 8% said, what's a validator? I was like, too bad, because, I mean, 40% is fine, but also there are more than 50% who know what a validator is, but for some reason they're not using it. And I wonder why. And there are also 8% who just don't know what a validator is, which is fine. I will tell you today. So I made this survey, but I also asked the same question on Reddit. I went on Reddit and asked people for their opinion, which is a really bad thing to do. You don't want to hear people's opinion on Reddit. But I did that. I just thought, I just went into the web dev subreddit and asked, do you validate your HTML? And I got some really interesting answers, and I want to go through these answers with you and talk a little bit about them. So the first answer was, I have no idea what validating my HTML even means. And I was like, yes, obviously, I'm so stupid. I can just ask this question. Of course, I have to explain what this thing is, because obviously there are people who don't know what the validator is. Okay, let me quickly explain. So when we write HTML, we have to follow certain rules, and it's really easy to break these rules, to just make a mistake, and then some of these rules is broken. So this happens. We are human, we make mistakes, fine. Discovering these issues is sometimes pretty hard because you have to look at the code, and especially with large documents, it's hard to find these issues. And in order to help us with that, there is a validation service. And it's an API that runs tests on a site and just checks if you're using the language correctly. And this website looks really old. I think it's really old, like late 90s or mid 90s old. 94, yeah. So it warms up my heart because I'm really I'm really familiar to this design, to this interface. And but there are different ways of validating. And what you can do is you take a URL. So for example, the Düsseldorf website, could be any other site, and you can paste it here, press check, and then it runs some tests similar to XDevTools and Lighthouse and so on. And it's checking the site, and then it throws some errors and warning. Like, the user interface isn't that beautiful, but it's kind of readable. For example, it says, consider avoiding viewport values that prevent users from resizing documents. Perfect example. So I showed you that X or Lighthouse said, hey, you shouldn't disable zooming, and the validator does the same thing. It doesn't throw an error, it says, you probably want to fix this. It's not a good thing to do. So we have the first thing that's related to accessibility that the validator also tells us. So even before testing accessibility, we could have avoided these issues just by validating the HTML. There are some other issues and warnings that you don't really have to bother with. For example, the type attribute is unnecessary for JavaScript resources. Yes, fine, you don't have to use it, but if you use it, it's also fine. Others are bad value, 40 pixels for attribute height on the image element. Usually, or according to spec, you don't use a unit if you define the height or the width of an element. But if you do, as far as I know, modern browsers can work with that. So it's wrong, but it works as far as I know. Element div is missing one or more of the following attributes. Role. So we have, again, this ARIA expanded issue. It's telling us, hey, you're using ARIA expanded on a div, which doesn't make sense. Fix that. Interesting stuff. And I really like this error because you can see here's the source element. So they have a picture element, and they are providing the browser with different resolutions of this image. And this is not related to accessibility, but to the general quality of the website. And in terms of performance, it could be related to accessibility. And what's happening here is you can see there's the source set attributes. They're defining the low resolution image and then the retina image. And the issue is here. So they forgot a space between the JPEG and the 2 times, so there should be a space, and this is just an issue in the markup. Like a really nice way to find this issue, because just by looking at it, no way that you are going to see that, because there's just too much going on, too many different numbers and letters. This is also interesting, stray end tag source, which means that they started somewhere a source tag, but they didn't close it. So this is also something about the general quality of the website. Another accessibility issue, the element button must not appear as a descendant of the A element, so they're nesting interactive elements. A button is in a link, and you should avoid that. You don't want to nest interactive elements that makes the user interface complicated, and also if you nest an interactive element in another element, you're messing with discoverability of this element. So screen reader users, for example, might not be able to access the button because it's obfuscated by what's happening around it in the link. Yeah, let's see. The P element not allowed as a child element of a span. Yes, I mean, who cares? But yes, you should fix that. Let's see, what else do we have here? Pretty similar issues. Empty heading, so there's an H3 with no content. You don't want that. Yeah, all kinds of different issues. You can see that the validator is telling us a lot of information, and it also tells us that there is an H4 in the UL. So again, you don't even have to learn something about accessibility testing tools. You can just use the validator. And another great feature of the validator is that you can check this checkbox here. So you can check this outline checkbox. And then you run another test. You will get the same results. But if you scroll down, there are a bunch of errors. You can see how they list the document outline of the page. So they list all the headings, and you can see if they're skipping headings and what kind of levels they're using. So it's a nice way of debugging the document outline. You can also upload a file if you want to, and you can paste HTML directly into this text area here. And let me quickly do that. I've prepared a document. Yes, this one. So you can paste the code, you run check, and then it will check the document that I wrote. And yeah, there are some issues with my document. For example, it says, consider adding a language attribute to the HTML start text. So I forgot to add the language attribute here. Or the head is missing the title. And this is, again, not just related to accessibility, but also SEO and general quality and understanding of the website. I'm using the H11 element here, which doesn't exist, and all kinds of different issues related to HTML. So it will tell you a lot of stuff about the quality of your code. Okay, so that answers this question. That's what a validator is. And unfortunately, I didn't check on time because sometime later, this person edited their post, and then they added to the post, edit, looked it up, I'm pretty comfortable going without. So they learned what a validator is, and they were like, nah, I don't need that. Yeah, unfortunately. Okay. So I asked the question, do you validate your HTML? And another person said, no, it's enough if the page looks right and works fine. HTML is just, data, and there is no, this is how the page looks like. So if you take an HTML document and you open it in a browser, it just has, you just see the visual appearance of this page. But the page itself is not a website in the browser, it's a document that consists of data. And this data might be parsed by all kinds of different tools, like search engines or a screen reader or some kind of other crawler. So what you see in the browser is just a visual representation of the document that you have written. So this is not a valid way of checking whether or not the quality of the HTML is great or not. So yeah, that's not enough. And I have to look at my notes because I'm not sure if there's something important I want to say. No. Okay. Do you validate your HTML? No. Typically, your IDE or browser will let you know if there's anything seriously wrong with your markup. Okay, interesting. So my IDE, I don't know the difference between IDE and editor and whatever. Is VS Code an IDE? I don't know. I'm using VS Code, and then a lot of people are using VS Code. So let's see if VS Code is telling me something about the quality of my HTML, or if the browser is telling me something about the quality of my HTML. So the same code that I just validated in the validator, I'm using it here in VS Code. And just by looking at the document, it looks fine. VS Code isn't telling me anything. I'm a 10x developer, great. Oh no, I'm not. So if I scroll down, you can see how in line 50, the syntax highlighting is changing because I forgot a closing quotation mark. So if I add that, okay, now that's better. So this is the one thing that the VS Code told me. There's something wrong here with this attribute. Let's open that in the browser because the person said the editor will tell you something and the browser as well. Okay, now the browser is telling me something. So I'm using a tool to just start a node server so I can access the page via localhost 5501. And because of this faulty attributes, you can see JavaScript code all of a sudden here because this plugin injects JavaScript and I'm messing with JavaScript because my HTML is broken. So let me just quickly fix that. And yes, so I fixed it. And now we have the page. And the page looks pretty great if you ask me. But if you look closely, it's talking to us. It's telling us, hey, there's something wrong. because I'm using an H1, actually an H11, and you can see that because it's not highlighted properly. So the font size and the styling is not what you expected. And also the list doesn't look like a list. There are no bullets. So there is some information. Unfortunately, most of the time we don't see this information because usually, I mean, this is just an assumption, but usually we don't just write the HTML first and then we check it, and if it's fine, then we write CSS. Usually we write everything at the same time. So some HTML, some CSS, some JavaScript, and then the CSS and the JavaScript obfuscates what we see on the screen. So sometimes these visual issues are hard to detect. So I would say no, they're not right. Do you validate your HTML? No, the real validation is getting the site working for the browsers and devices your site targets. Okay, again, it's not about the visuals, it's a document, it's a data format. It might be parsed and interpreted by all kinds of different applications and tools. And also, if you ask me, the sites and devices we target are all the browsers and devices that there are, because we want to make websites that work in all kinds of different devices. And I'm talking too much, I'm going to just speed it up a bit. Do you validate your HTML? I don't think that the W3 validator will understand my React code, lol. Okay. Let's see. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a React developer. Again, I don't know that stuff. So I took my HTML that I just showed you, and I turned it into React. So I'm in CodePen now. There is an empty div, and I've created some components. And you can see that I'm using JSX, and there is a my section and my paragraph and my list and my list item. So I have all these kinds of components. And let's see what the browser does with it and if the browser can work with that. So yeah, let's look at the rendered website. Before we validate, let me just quickly check the JSX in this website. So I'm using DevTools. Let's see. Where's my JSX? It's gone. Yes, of course, because it's not in the browser. What gets rendered on the browser is HTML. You can write all the JSX and all the JavaScript you want. In the end, what's delivered to the browser is HTML. So it makes a difference. And yes, the browser can work with what's rendered and what the output of your React code. OK. Do you validate your HTML? Absolutely not. I think you'll have a hard time finding a modern website that passes all the W3 validations. Yes, that's why I'm talking now, because nobody validates their sites. And of course, there are issues everywhere, which doesn't mean that you just ignore it. OK. Do you validate your HTML? No, not since HTML5 became a thing. And this is interesting. I have no answer for that. Before HTML5, we had XHTML. And if you wanted to pass all the rules of XHTML 0.1 strict, that was pretty hard sometimes. And with HTML5, that changed because HTML5 is supposed to be backwards compatible. So the rules aren't that strict anymore. And maybe people just, tested the websites and they say, OK, there are not that many issues anymore, so I don't have to test anymore. I got better at writing HTML. Maybe that's the reason. I don't know. Or maybe it's because at the same time also the tooling changed and we have more different ways of checking the quality of our websites. But I don't have an answer to that one. But it's interesting. A lot of people said that. Do you validate your HTML? No. I think Wikig is more important nowadays. OK. But it's still hardly a concern unless you are doing something for the public sector. This doesn't make sense because it seems like they're assuming that people who use assistive technology only visit websites from the public sector. Oh, let me quickly check the results of yesterday's soccer game. I'm going to visit the website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and see if they have information about the soccer games yesterday. No, that just doesn't make sense. Yeah. Do you validate your HTML? No, absolutely not. OK. Do you validate your HTML? No, with current reactive frameworks, it doesn't really make sense. OK. Interesting. I don't know. I really don't know. Let's see. OK, so this is my React version of the code. This is how it looks like. I'm running the validator. I have a plugin where I can access it directly. I run the test. How long am I talking already?
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay.
Well, this is already the
Okay.
Zoom call, but we've got time.
OK. If you're bored, tell me, because you look tired. At least some of you look tired, but I'm not sure if it's me or if it's the event yesterday. Okay. Okay, so I'm validating that, but nothing is happening because, I don't know, maybe the validator also wants me to stop talking. Let's try again. Validate local, no. Is my connection gone? Twitter is reliable, let's check, okay. No, I'm not online anymore. Okay, this is too bad. No. Just a second, let me restart it. Okay, great. So, yes, now let's validate this page. Perfect, no errors. Interesting. So what's happening here is that in my React document, there's just a div, and we're using JavaScript to populate this div with my components, with all the content. And what the validator checks is what's in the document before React kicks in. So they're kind of right. It doesn't make sense to use the validator on a React website or any framework. Really, I'm not hating about React. Like I work with React, and it's fine. Actually, it's pretty great for some things. But it's the same thing for all JavaScript frameworks, I guess. So that's a problem. They're right. But there are different ways of validating. So you don't have to use this service. You can also use other services. Or, for example, there is a nice bookmark by DQ. Where is it? Yes. So they have this bookmarklet, and you just drag and drop it into your bookmarks bar, and then you can validate what's visible on the page at that moment. So if I press that validate bookmarklet that I drag and drop into my bookmarks bar, it then finds all the issues. Yeah, because now it checks the rendered HTML. So this is definitely possible. What's interesting here is that it lists less errors. And if we look at the code, so for example, if I look at these links, and I was using a non-existing attribute, the down-load attribute. Now it's gone. And on one of the options in the select, I set selected to true, which is also a wrong value, and it's gone. So it seems like React is removing some of the faulty HTML, which you could say is a good feature, but for me, I don't like that because they're just removing stuff without telling me, and I would like to know about the things that I got wrong. But there are things that React is telling me. So if you look at the console, there's actually some validation, which is really nice. So it says the H11 tag is unrecognized, or you shouldn't set true on the down-load attribute, but the attribute is gone. That's what I don't. But okay, there's at least an issue. So there is some validation here, which is great. React complains loudly if the source is not compliant. This was also one of the answers. So let's see. I just show you that it says some things here. And if you look at the code, you can see in CodePen it tells me, JSX closing tag for strong, there's something wrong with the way I've nested HTML elements. So this is something that React actually does. It tells me, hey, you've nested this paragraph in a wrong way because it started with the P, then strong, and I closed the P before the strong, and React complains about it, which is great. So we have some kind of validation. So this is true. React validates some stuff. There are still some issues. Undetermined string constant. Okay, that's the attribute here. And another one, okay, JSX closing tag for H1. Yeah, this is missing. So this is actually kind of true. React does some things because they're very strict about their closing tags in JSX. So this is great. But there are still some things that it doesn't report. So it will tell you some things, but not all of the things. Just use a linter like ESLint. And I'm not sure about that one because this sounds like a good reason to just not use the validator. And here in this CodePen example, I was using like raw React. I just used React and React DOM, and that's it. I didn't use any boilerplate, but a lot of people use create React app to bootstrap a React app, and this comes with additional tooling. So let's check that quickly. Nope. So if we look at my app, it's pretty similar to what we saw in CodePen. You can see that it actually also tells me, hey, there's something wrong. Okay, there's something wrong with the nesting. We already had that. I have to fix all these issues in my code. And now it looks fine. If I start the app, I run npm start, it will tell me, it will start the site. Okay, great. But it also throws some errors. So it tells me the href attribute requires a valid value. Okay, interesting. We haven't seen that yet. And it's about this link. It only has a hash, so you have to provide some meaningful information here. Okay, nice, save. No duplicate props allowed. So I'm using the with attribute twice. Let's get rid of that. Image elements must have an alt property. So they're telling us you have to put an alt attribute on the image. Nice, I really like that. Okay, now it's fine, but there are still issues in the document. So yes, it's true, ESLint will tell you a lot of things if you're using the React E11Y whatever thing, I forgot the name. It will tell you a lot of things about the quality in terms of HTML, but not everything. You still have to validate. Okay, do you validate your HTML? Nope. If it works in Chrome, I'm happy. Yeah, you shouldn't be a developer. Do you validate your HTML? No, I'm generally using React, which is using browser DOM APIs to create the HTML. All you would be doing validating that the browser works, which if it doesn't, what could you do about it anyway? And this really hurts my brain because yes, there is an API that creates the HTML, but someone has to put the HTML in there. So you're not explicitly creating HTML, but implicitly by creating these components. So it's pretty much the same thing. And what do you do if the browser doesn't work? I don't know, go outside, enjoy life, hug a tree, something like that, I don't know. Yeah, so it doesn't make sense. Do you validate your HTML? No, I don't validate, but again, my HTML pages are small and light. Honey, hasn't anyone told you that the size doesn't matter, it's about the technique. So you're gonna always, you can have a lot of errors in a small HTML page. Do you validate your HTML? No. If writing raw HTML code, I rely on IDE plugins or Chrome console to tell me if my HTML is valid. I don't know, the console won't tell you too much about the quality of your HTML. There is one exception. It's a browser called Edge, you might have heard of it. And in Edge, and also in Chrome, but it works better in Edge, they have an issues panel, which I like, and they run X in this issues panel, and WebHint and some other tools. And they will tell you about accessibility issues and best practices, and also compatibility issues and so on. So the issues panel is something that will give you information about the quality of your markup. So this is a nice thing. Use it. There are also some tests in Chrome, but not as many as in Edge. Do you validate your page, your markup? If using React, invalid HTML is impossible as it is auto-generated. I don't know what to do with that. Do you validate your HTML? No, I used to, but I don't think now if they kept up to date. But I don't think I know if they kept up to date with the latest HTML elements and attributes or not. Okay, this is some really great feedback, and I didn't know either because the website is like 1994, really old, and it just looks old. So I asked Steve Faulkner, and it said, yes, it's being maintained. It's on GitHub. Like the whole thing is being maintained. It's, like I took this screenshot 2 days ago, and the last commit was 2 days ago, 12 hours ago on that day. Okay. So it's been actively maintained, and it's just the website that looks old, but you can use it in many different ways, in a lot of different ways, and in ways I don't understand. I tried to read the page, but just didn't understand it. So, but yeah, it's actively being maintained. It's absolutely fine. Do you validate your HTML? Yes. And a lot of people don't care about the health. No, this is something that someone said. And a lot of people don't care about the health impacts of smoking, but that doesn't mean that it's suddenly safe. I really like that analogy to testing. Someone said, when you're starting out, you can learn a lot. You might have forgotten a language attribute or to include a character set. It can be a great learning tool at every stage of your career. fantastic advice. I really like that. Just like in X DevTools and in Lighthouse, with this learn more and more information link, you can learn a lot by validating your HTML. It's a great learning resource. I like that. Depending on the context, it's pretty damn important for SEO and accessibility. Yes. And we confirmed that with the Düsseldorf website. There are some things that are related to accessibility and SEO, and you can improve the general quality of your website. I don't do it religiously, but if something is displaying weirdly, that's one of the things I check. This is also fantastic because that's also what I do. So sometimes display issues are not related to CSS or to JavaScript, but actually to faulty HTML. And validating will just make sure that everything's fine with the HTML before you start debugging CSS. My workplace main clients are banks, and they force us to validate a lot of stuff. Even this, lol. Great. Great bank. Today, you're better off running an accessibility audit, which will help ensure your tags are semantically correct, that the minimum required attributes are used where applicable, and usually check for simple syntax issue. Yes, that's right, we confirmed that. But again, these tools don't find everything, and also the validation will give you additional information about the general quality. So yeah, I demonstrated that. It's part of accessibility, so yes, amen. Sometimes I make mistakes and I don't notice. I make mistakes all the time. I'm so bad, not just bad at computers, but also at typing. Like I mess up things all the time. So I'm really glad that there's tooling that will tell me, hey, you have to change that. I'm often not the only person crafting the markup. Crafting the markup, what a nice expression. And yes, that's also a good one, because sometimes it's not just you who's working on a certain thing, but many different people with many different experiences and levels of knowledge. Sometimes I'm only working on a nested template within a larger structure, and that larger structure has hard to spot errors that interact unpredictably with my small part. Yes, this is also interesting, because especially in modern web development, we're not usually just building a whole page, but smaller components that will be used in other larger components. Valid HTML is pretty crucial for screen readers and other parsers. Yes. Occasionally, less common browsers, renderers will do weird things with semi-valid markup. Yes, if there's a script or CSS errors ruling out markup problem, lets me narrow the scope of my investigation. I really like that. That's why it's green. And the last reply, and I really liked it, was, in this thread, tell me you're under 35 without telling me that you're under 35. It was a reference to all the React stuff and the interesting things. There are different ways to validate. For example, there's HTML validate on NPM, and there's also a Netlify plugin. So my website is hosted on Netlify, and I install this plugin, and when I deploy my site, it will validate the page, and if there's a validation error, it doesn't deploy. That's it. Thanks so much for watching. I'm so sorry that it took so long. I told you. Thank you.
Fantastic, Manuel. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you don't have to apologize at the people here and at the people in the live stream, because I think it was really, really interesting. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm just feeling a little bit for the captioner we have, because you really increased the speed quite a lot in the end, so hopefully this was still bearable. Thanks very much for the great presentation. I'm going to be a bit quick now, because we're a little bit over schedule. Manuel will be around. You will have the chance to ask him questions. We are going to have another break now, but this is a special type of break, because we are going to switch media at this point. The next presentation will be by Vasilis. Vasilis can't be with us today, so we're going to switch over to Zoom call, which is quite, doesn't really matter for you here in the room, but it's going to matter for you in the live stream. The Zoom call will also be streamed to YouTube. The YouTube URL is still live.ally.club, but you will have to refresh your browser in a couple of minutes, because the stream URL on the other side will change. So make sure that you properly refresh your browser for that. All the registered attendees will have a link to the Zoom call in the email we just sent out around noon. So please feel free to head over to there. I think we can start there in like 10 minutes or something, but we need some break for setting up the camera to the Zoom call. So Hope this works for all of you. Jumping over to the Zoom call. See you there in like 10 minutes. Have a short break. Two things, sorry. For the Zoom call, to take part in the Zoom call, you need a Zoom account. It's free. If you don't have a Zoom call, please register one. We are using this as a very tiny protection against spammers. Obviously, still, if someone leaks the Zoom call URL, spammers will be able to enter, but maybe this prevents some weird stuff going on. And one other thing, just wanted to mention, because it's again happening, like shortly before Manuel's talk, we exceeded the 2,000 followers on Twitter, which is absolutely fantastic, I think. And the last time something like this happened was the 1,000 mark, and it was in 2019 at the Berlin Summit. So obviously, always when we have an event, people like to jump on our Twitter account. Thanks a lot for everyone following us there. So break now. See you back in 10 minutes or something. Such is life. So, any questions in the room? I think you can just speak aloud, and Vasilis should hear you, or the other people on the stream, obviously. And also, now we are in a live interactive mode, so others could also just switch on their microphone and ask you questions.
And we can use the microphone as well. It's through my...
And I can use the microphone. Yeah. Any questions?
From my side, more thank you. And where did I shout? Okay. So I'm very used to hear people blaming developers for not doing things right. So I think it's good that designers can own it too, because if you already start adding accessibility and inclusion in the development phase, you're already too late. So the way I learned it was with accessibility and usability, and it goes together. So there is no way to get usability without having accessibility. And I like the way you do it. I'm really gonna copy some of your slides from there, some of the experiments to try to do something about it. I love the exclusive design principles that you just showed. And
please copy it and share it everywhere. Yeah, fantastic.
And I love the irony of making things worse, even worse than they already are, in order to learn and get some pointers there for the future. Thank you very much. Oh.
Yeah, it's actually a very nice trick to teach things to students. It's just studying the same thing. So if you're trying to make something as inaccessible as possible, you're still studying accessibility. So, and then instead of making something that works, which we're doing all the time, we're making something that's provocative. And this is also a way of learning that you're never going to forget that you made something that's really, really horrible to use, right? Or something that makes the world just worse. And it's a good way of telling stories, it's a good way of learning stuff. So that's why every now and then I use this. It doesn't work for everybody. Some designers really, really have problems with it because they don't want to make stuff that doesn't work. And I can understand that. But it's a good way. Sometimes it works really well.
I can also imagine some designers enjoying it because they can do art. So there's this sadomasochism part to it.
Yeah. And I learned this from a colleague of mine. He uses this when he teaches about designing with ethics in mind. And then he's just designing the most unethical thing that you can imagine, which is also a way to study ethics. Yeah. So it applies in various ways, and it's also a very interesting way to research things. So for instance, if you look at performance, web performance, you could also always try to make it as performant as possible, but everybody's doing that. And what happens if you make it as unperformant as possible? And maybe there's stuff out there that we don't know yet. So I think it's a very interesting way of researching as well. It just gets your creativity going.
Thank you.
Anyone else wants to share something?
I really like your approach, Vasilis, where you go and give your students the experience disabled people have. Very often, the barriers they run into, not only on the web, but also physical impairments, like this little electroshocker. It might be a bit over for some people, like saying, oh my God, you're giving electroshocks to your students? But on the other side, I love that idea. I love that idea because a lot of people have actual pain using the keyboard, or because they are forced to, but they experience pain. And it's a great way to show, look, there's ways around this.
Yeah, but I always warn them, right, when we use this. And it's not very, very painful. But I teach them how to use this thing. Yeah. I first create a safe environment where they're allowed to use this stuff. Yeah. I think it's a good way, in a way, but I think it's incomplete without bringing real people in later on in their school period. So I really think the most powerful way to test accessibility and to make people understand what it means is to bring these people over and to work with them. any questions in the chat, because I cannot see the YouTube chat, for instance. But
The problem with the YouTube chat is always that it's like delayed for about 1 minute or something, or 40 seconds.
Okay.
So we would hopefully have questions in the Zoom chat, because that's in real time. But so far, we just have people saying thank you, because this was a great presentation.
Okay, I would like to hear your thoughts on it. Also, if you disagree with me, I would love to hear that, because there's often, when I started out with this idea, I said, okay, we'll just get rid of all semantics and everything is fixed. And then some real power users and some real experienced accessibility people, they came up to me and said, no, you cannot start promoting that kind of stuff, because that's just not the solution to the problem. And I agree there. So I would really, if you disagree with the stuff that I'm saying, I would love to hear that. And this means that I can fine-tune my message, right? Because I understand that it's just not, I'm not there yet. I'm just trying something as well. So if you disagree, I'd love to hear it as well.
So this is a great chance to like fight Vasilis.
I'm a big fan of semantics, I can tell you that out loud. So we need to make use of the language of new media that we already have. But I don't want to be so close-minded not to give any chance for disruption, like maybe by challenging the rules. There's a place where you're going to find something new that will be part of the language in the future. So semantics is part of a language, so it's living. And it should be open to changes too. But I agree with, a web without semantics, it would be wild.
No, but I agree, and it would be ridiculous as well. And semantics are fantastic, really helpful, not just for people with screen readers, but for everybody. I love semantics. I use them just really all the time. What I think maybe we should conclude that we should maybe see how many semantics should be used. So for instance, if you make everything a header, or home pages, for instance, they often have 100 headers and 200 links on them. Then it's not as much the semantics that make it inaccessible, but the amount of items on the page that make it inaccessible. Maybe fewer semantics, fewer items helps lots of people as well. So this is also something that came out of that discussion that I had back and forth with people who don't like heading levels and people who depend on heading levels.
So they're going to
challenge. And these are also some rules that don't show up in the accessibility guidelines, I think. It doesn't tell you there are just way too many elements on this page. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe they do, but I think this should be one of the success criteria. That's just too much here. No way somebody who cannot see it is going to understand what's going on.
I'm going to challenge that back to you. So I think the issue with the headings is that people don't understand how headings work. So in order to have a heading, you need to have some content. If you only have heading, then you don't have content, and you don't need a heading. Then I agree with you.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest problem is people don't understand the semantics.
The other problem is, of course, web developers. Web developers don't understand headings themselves. If you look at 90% of the websites, I think heading level structure is just ridiculous. There's just no structure there. So it's hard to use heading levels as a tool if 90% of the websites out there don't use them correctly. So that's another problem. But we could go on forever about heading levels.
Yes. Now the last challenge I'm going to give, because you're blaming now front-end developers, but usually my experience, the design comes already with the headings showing as a headings. So they're taking something that looks like a heading and making it a heading, even if it was not designed properly from the beginning.
I'm not blaming front-end developers, I'm actually blaming the web. The fun thing about the web is that everybody can call themselves a front-end developer. And what we learned today is that it's actually really hard. If you looked at the first two talks, it's really hard to learn front-end development, if you really want to understand how this all works, how semantics works, and how you can even apply some of these new and fantastic ways of CSS into your design process. I mean, no way that somebody who just started with HTML understands the scope of it. It's so complicated. So this is a problem with the web that we cannot fix, and we won't fix it. Everybody can call themselves an expert, and nobody is. So, yeah. And everybody can call themselves a web designer. It's just, that's part of the web.
Quite some people nodding here, Vasilis. You can probably see that. But.
So I don't have the solution here. We cannot fix it. It's the web. It's chaotic. It's a mess. That's a good thing.
Okay, I think the Accessibility Club is slowly coming to an end, and usually we would have like half an hour of a discussion round here. There is only like 15 minutes left, and I tried to ask, or not, I didn't only try, I asked people on Twitter like a couple of weeks ago already if they got questions to ask to Stephanie and Manuel and you, Vasilis, but I got no questions. So everything seems to be clarified. No, not really.
Maybe one question?
Oh,
I have one question.
okay.
So when will the workshop together with Beyond Tolerant and Accessibility Club happen, where we learn exclusive design with you, Vasilis? Or we can like try out. That would be nice.
I'll come over anytime you want me to. I'll have to bring some friends of mine though, because otherwise, yeah, it will be good. Yeah, okay, let's do it.
Well,
That would be great.
No pressure.
We'll organize a workshop. That's nice. Yeah.
I'm totally for doing this with Beyond Tolerant, but Vasilis, many of here actually know that you and I plan to have an Accessibility Club summit in Amsterdam at your high school, at the university, like 2 years ago. And obviously it had to be cancelled, but we're going to pick up on this maybe next year, or whatever your university says, or what's been possible to do. So this might also be a good chance to do it there, and you don't have to bring all these people with you. We could just go and see them where they are at the moment, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And have them over at our inaccessible high school.
Well, it's still possible to have this with Beyond Tolerant as well, of course, and don't want to steal this idea.
Yeah.
Maybe we can use the last 15 minutes to just reflect on what we've heard. Like, I think there were a lot of accessibility-related talks at Beyond Tolerant. I think most of people here in the room have been attending Beyond Tolerant. We had this fantastic 3 presentations today. So first of all, thanks to all 3 of you. It was just amazing again. Thanks for being with us. What do you think? What are the most important challenges we could actually solve right now? What's your learning out of the last 3 days? Any opinions on that? What are you going to take home with you?
For me, it's mainly teaching, because I work in a team where we have many developers, and some do front-end but don't really know it. And you know, HTML is simple, so everyone can do it. And I think my role is to teach more. Like, for example, I plan to show them how they can validate the HTML, and I didn't know that utility in Edge, because I think that's a great thing, because it goes through step by step. That's one thing I take home, like to talk more about it, even if the other people don't want to hear it. Or sometimes they just don't know it. It's not an ill intention, I guess.
I think that's a great learning, isn't it? It's a great thing to take home with.
that's one of the insights that I had. Yeah.
Yeah, for me also, not only to make things accessible, but also gives those people a good user experience, like the boing boing thing with screen readers. That you just showed yesterday. It was very mind-opening.
To see more
And I think if I may say something here, I think this is actually, if you compare the user experience for, well, especially people who are blind, so for a screen reader, if you compare that to what we are used to, or what we find accessible or acceptable, right? There's no way we would design this for ourselves. No way that we would say, well, this is good enough. If we had an experience like most people have with a screen reader, there's just so much to improve there, which is also something that is nice because it's easy to improve because everything is so bad. It's not that hard to create something that's better. So right now, in the next few years, if we start taking this seriously, designing for accessibility, it's just an easy job. It's so easy to make big steps now. So yeah, this is something that I wanted to emphasize a little bit, just how big the difference is between what we design visually and what other people have to work with.
I think in that sense, all the voice assistants are going to help a lot, because now you don't need to say we're designing for the poor blind people, who knows a blind person, but it's like, hey, you've got Alexa at home, you got Hey Google, or you got Siri, do it for yourself, and then pull on the egoistically sense to bring that forward.
Yeah, absolutely true. So there's more designers also involved in designing voice interaction. The voices are getting better, much better. So yeah, it's a good thing. Things are changing for the good part. Yeah.
And it's because you just said it's easy to fix things because the situation is just so bad. There's so many things that are broken, so it's easy to fix things. And it's not just easy, but it's also important to remember that there's so much wrong that you don't have to get it perfect. You don't have to make a perfectly accessible website. You just realizing it, and I realized it only a few years ago, removes a lot of pressure from you, because if you approach accessibility on the web as with like this idea that you just make it a little bit better than it was yesterday, it's much easier and it removes a lot of pressure, and it will be easier for you to get to a satisfying result. But if you approach it with, okay, I have to make it perfect, it's really hard and it puts you under a lot of pressure. And that's what I talked to the Professor Patata people, and they said it was really interesting to see that, because we didn't consider adding alt attributes or images on Instagram, and we're going to do that now for all the images. And I said, yes, do it, but you don't have to fix everything. Just start with the next image that you're posting. It's much easier, and if you just get into the flow, into fixing stuff, and do better. That helped me a lot.
I 100% agree. It's the same experience I had when I started out trying to get into accessibility on the web. It was so overwhelming because there's not only the WCAG, there's all the guidelines, there's guidelines in Germany which are specific, and then you have to watch out for the actual user, which can be hard because people don't want to pay for people being brought to an agency, their budgets, and those budgets never ever include user testing, or hardly ever. At least that's my experience in the last 15 years. I think I had one client in 15 years who actively said, we want user testing. And it's not like I did only 3 projects. And I always try to sell this idea to my colleagues as well, who are in part not really caring about a good user experience. Like one colleague actually said, I don't care if someone can use what I'm putting slightest, you know, those baby steps. How can you push someone only slightly? Because making him change 100%, like making him turn around 180 degrees, that's impossible from the get-go.
What I'm trying to
I guess it's easier to convince this colleague of your if you're bringing in somebody who wants to use their website but cannot use it, and just show it, right? This is one of the most confronting things that, for instance, Q42 does. Every 3 months, I think they invite a bunch of blind people over to just test all their stuff. And it's so confronting to see that every time, even such an agency that takes it really seriously, that everything is broken. So you cannot say to somebody who's sitting next to you, sorry, but you're not allowed to use this. I mean, that's just not right. That's much harder to say than when you're talking about some abstract person somewhere else on the other side of the internet line. So bringing in real people helps, I think.
Well, I like doing some workshops, and this contradicts a bit what I said earlier, is that I like to dehumanize accessibility a bit when I'm working with developers, because sometimes it really works to tell them there are 94 errors on your website. And when they see, oh, wait a minute, there's an error, like I can fix that. Let's actually create a ticket. Like I was in workshops, and I told them this is wrong. And you can see them writing issues in GitHub because they didn't want to have bad quality on their website. They didn't want to see like red somewhere, an error popping up somewhere. So sometimes this is a nice way of communicating with developers who work a bit differently.
I agree, you need to adapt to your audience. So I have different talks depending on who I'm talking to. So if I'm talking to designers, I usually talk about designing for the extremes, and that disabled people are the same as people who are power users. So you're losing innovation. So you want to be innovative, and you want your things to be available for the widest audience as possible. But if everyone designs for the average, everyone is doing the same. And on the other side, if I talk to project management, I talk about money, because they understand accessibility as something for the poor disabled. They're still stuck in the medical or in the charity models of disability, but they didn't advance with the science. And they don't know that people have money, people want to work, and you're losing huge opportunities if you don't do things right. I mean, it's your job to do things right. If you want to ignore it, it's your job, and you're not a good professional if you're not doing it, okay? But then you're going to lose money. So at the end, it's going to be on the line. You want to earn more money or not? And some people react to money, some people react to innovation, some people react to errors. So you have to find get to know people, yeah, the biggest pain point, and then go and you can adapt it to the biggest pain point. I think there's get to know people. You know, sometimes we don't talk to people that think differently, so that could be a good point.
Maybe I'll add something. This might not be so directly in tech, but my thesis is focused on inclusion of people with disabilities. And I was studying the approaches of different humanitarian organizations, and I had to pick out certain best practices. One thing that stood out for me from two of the organizations were how they were able to integrate this budget thing into their policy. So they were telling me about how easier it is for some of their country offices to do better because senior level management, you know, is interested in it. And while I keep hearing budget in the room, it's because money is actually very important to carry out some of these tests, or to even have maybe somebody external come to look at the project and all of that. But then when this consideration is integrated into the organization's policy, one of the organizations, they charge 3% for all the grants that they get for ensuring accessibility. And the expert I spoke with was more like, sometimes you get, when you want to query the field staff, you know, why they don't have people with disabilities in local community programs. They tell you there is no budget for transportation, those little things. So right now there is budget and you have no excuse. You know, so I think having those things as part of the organization's policy will go a long the developer or the project team knows that there is budget for this, then you have no excuse, you know. Yeah.
I think that's a very important thing to mention as well, that accessibility should be in the organization, right? So I think Schiphol, the airport in the Netherlands, is a good example of that. That they have or they used to have a very big Scrum or many Scrum teams, and I think every team, from an organizational point of view, they have to have one accessibility expert in it. So a team is not complete if they don't have an accessibility expert in it. And this is an organizational idea of them. So this was one of the product owners. He made sure that this happened because he was the accessibility advocate at Schiphol, but he knew that he wasn't going to stay there forever. So he didn't want a situation to occur when he left, accessibility would leave as well. So he made sure that this was part of the organizational structure of that company, that a team is not complete without an accessibility expert. So really getting management on board here and making sure that budget is assigned to accessibility, yeah, indeed, that's a very important part of accessibility as well. Yeah.
Vasilis, do you have a plan for traineeships or collaboration with private companies for your students?
Well, we have lots of, we're always looking for internships for our students, but I'm not sure if I understand the question exactly, but.
No, I was thinking, so in Germany we have sometimes a complaint that designers do not learn about accessibility or developers do not learn about accessibility. And
Yeah.
sometimes there's like a gap between universities, the real world, and the companies. So I was thinking if that was also part, like if your students have the chance of bringing your exclusive design to companies in real life.
Yeah, that's. I'm in, we can play around with accessibility, and then in the real world, they work with a cynical art director, and they say, "No, we don't care about this stuff. Just fix it." Right? That's absolutely what's happening, and I'm sure that many of my students, what they've learned in the few courses that I teach them, they unlearn it in a few weeks when they're in practice. That's, yeah, that absolutely happens. But it's also true that I do see more and more students who every now and then I meet them, they do work with accessibility and they didn't forget everything that I taught them.
No, I think that's awesome because you're planting a seed. And the biggest problem we have with what Manuel showed with the web aim is that we're creating content faster than we're fixing it. And we cannot rely on a lone writer, accessibility expert. It has to be a village effort.
Yeah, true.
Okay. I would say time is up for this round of Accessibility Club, kind of. If there's one last thing you would want to say, then now's your chance. Otherwise, I would ask Mark to come to me in front of you. I'm going to switch off this microphone so that we don't get any hits down. Okay, you should hear us, hopefully. I'm not really sure. Yeah, it looks like we're on screen now. Wow, this looks great. Woo! So, this was it for the 11th Accessibility Club meetup. Hope you enjoyed your time here. Hope you enjoyed the last 2 days with Mark. I think we did, yes.
I did as well, yeah. I enjoyed myself.
Yeah, me too. So, Thanks for being here. Thanks for your contributions. Thanks for Stephanie, Manuel, and Vasilis. Oh, we don't see you right now. Thanks for your contributions. Thanks for your questions. It was really great to have you. Hope to see you soon again. I don't know what exactly the plans are, but there is definitely going to be a Beyond Tellerrand conference in September in Berlin, and maybe there is also something the Accessibility Club does then. You will definitely...
For sure it will be.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
I know
What can I say? So, thanks a lot for being here. Please feel free to hang around a couple of minutes. We don't have to leave at once, but thanks again to the people on the live stream. Glad you were joining us. Hope you had a great time, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yoshi.